Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here at our very first webinar on the recently launched Live Beyond campaign from the Office of the California Surgeon General. We are so excited to share this exciting campaign with you all, and we'll be taking you all through a webinar of its development, youth involved in the creation, and some of the assets and tools we have available online now. So thank you all so much for joining and registering. As a reminder to everyone, we will be sharing out the recording of this webinar on our Live Beyond YouTube channel, as well as to everyone who registered. In the meantime, too, should you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A. Some of those we will answer live. The ones we aren't able to answer, we will send out a frequently asked questions to all registered participants afterward, and we'll have some time at the end for any Q&A. But feel free to please put those all in the chat, and we are so excited and delighted everyone is here today. Next slide, please. So what we are going to cover today is a range of topics. We're going to talk about our background of our campaign, the goals and the audience, what type of advisory went into this campaign, a lot of the insights and learnings from youth and young adults across the state. We'll showcase our creative, some of the really exciting youth co-created components of our campaign, talk a bit about our launch and some of the resources that are available, as well as time for Q&A at the end, as we mentioned. So next slide, please. And I want to do some quick introductions of who will be here presenting today. We are so delighted and honored to have Dr. Diana Ramos. She is the California Surgeon General, and we are so excited to have her here today to speak about the campaign and many of the efforts that she's leading related to the ACES and Toxic Stress campaign. I myself am Camelia Mortazadeh, Director of Strategy and Insights at Civilian Agency. We're very fortunate to be able to help build this campaign in partnership with Cal HHS and the Office of the California Surgeon General. We're also really delighted to have Setare Harsamizadeh Tehrani available today too. She will be co-presenting with us. She is a youth advisor from ACES Aware, and she'll talk to you more about that work. And also my teammate, Kara O'Shea, she's our account supervisor, who will be also talking a bit today. We have a lot of other folks and individuals and organizations that aren't here today to speak about our campaign, but I will just do a quick shout out to some of the organizations you see here who we've worked with very closely in developing this campaign. So next slide, please. Without further ado, I am now going to hand it off to Dr. Diana Ramos, who will share with you some background of the campaign. Thank you, Dr. Ramos, for being here today.
Thank you so much, Camille, and welcome everyone to our very first Live Beyond webinar. This is so exciting. It's been years in the making. Today, I'll be providing an update on the campaign and highlighting how co-creation with diverse youth, many with lived experiences, has been at the center of our work. But first, I want to ground us with the intentions and backgrounds behind the campaign. Through the state's historic Children's Youth Behavioral Health Initiative, otherwise known as CYBHI, the Office of the California Surgeon General, my office, was charged with creating a campaign to increase public understanding of adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, and toxic stress. And as many of you are aware, ACEs are stressful or potentially traumatic events that occur before the age of 18. And ACEs can sometimes cause toxic stress, the prolonged and intense activation of the body's stress response, all of the hormones that can become very bad for our bodies, that can lead to poor mental and physical health outcomes. Now, the campaign would provide youth and young adults across California with the knowledge, the resources, and strategies needed to manage toxic stress, healing from adversity, and ending the cycle of trauma for their generation and many more to come. So lots of exciting initiatives and goals that we have for this campaign. If we can go to the next slide, please. So the campaign is critical. Oh, sorry, one more back. The campaign is critical as experiencing ACEs is national. And in California, findings from a 2023 baseline survey that was conducted by RAND, which is a research organization here in California, that was done among California youth and youth adults aged 16 to 25. And parents and caregivers of youth ages 8 to 16 revealed the following: that 3 of 5 people in California have experienced at least one ACE, 3 out of 5. 23% of youth and 30% of parents and caregivers have experienced 4 or more ACEs. And as the number of ACEs we experience increases, so does the risk for toxic stress, as well as related serious disease conditions. Now, only 10% of youth and caregivers had heard of the term ACEs and know that the what the acronym stood for. So indicating a pressing need to educate Californians about ACEs so that they can begin to, one, understand, identify, and more importantly, heal. And finally, investing in strategies to prevent ACEs and mitigate their long-term effects on yield and yield substantial benefits, not only to individuals and their families, but also in terms of population health and reduced economic burden. So this was highlighted in a recent publication in the Journal of the American Medical Association, or JAMA, that found that the national economic impact of ACE-related adult health conditions amounts to over $14.1 trillion annually. So on an individual level, the economic burden amounts to about $88,000 per adult annually and 2.4 million over their lifetimes. This is really sobering data. Thank you for advancing. So this campaign is first and foremost intended to reach youth and young adults. And most importantly, it was created by a broad range of diverse voices to ensure that our strategy, creative, and tactics are resonant with our main audiences that we're trying to reach. Also, adolescence is an important time of development and reflection, and a prime time to build an understanding of past experiences and build skills to manage future stress, strengthen relationships, and obtain the support in the near and long term. So we are also creating messages to reach parents and caregivers of youth aged 8 to 16, as well as creating materials for healthcare providers, community-based organizations, and other key partners where adverse childhood experience screening and education occurs. Now, as with many Children's Youth Behavioral Health Initiative campaigns, or the CYBHI, we are focusing on BIPOC, economically disadvantaged, system-impacted, and tribal and indigenous communities, and many other intersections of identities not listed here. And now I would like to pass it back to Camelia to talk about the many varied advisors informing the development of the campaign.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ramos, and thank you so much for being here to introduce our campaign. So as she mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about how this campaign came about. So in order for us to develop this campaign, it was first very important for us to listen and hear what Californians across the state know, think, and feel about the topic of ACEs and toxic stress. We first conducted robust listening sessions with diverse participants across the state. We held a total of about 7 listening sessions in English and Spanish with youth, parents, and caregivers, and CBO partners across the state, and engaged a total of about 86 participants with a smattering of CBOs that you see here, although there were many more. And we do have a report that you can find on the Office of the California Surgeon General's website, linked below, if you are interested in learning more about what we heard from the campaign. Next slide, please. Most importantly with Live Beyond, though, is the efforts that we have made to really center youth and young adult voices in our campaign development from start to finish. And we were fortunate to work with the youth and young adult advisors from the ACES Aware Initiative. On this slide, you'll see a range of youth we met with monthly, sometimes more, since mid last year to discuss our campaign development, which included formative listening sessions to really reviewing our creative, our website, our colors, our logos, our messaging, event planning ideation, and so much more. So there's a lot that went into it. And here with me, as well as I mentioned, we have Setara, who is here to also talk a bit about the youth advisory process. So I'm going to pass it off to Setara to share some of her insights on this campaign and working with us.
Thank you. So at ACES Aware, we have, if we could go back to the last slide, we have 6 young adult patient advisors and facilitators from disproportionately impacted communities who co-design and co-facilitate a 15-member youth and young adult council that meets monthly with members impacted by ACEs across California. So together we form a group of 21 youth and young adults who represent all 10 regions in California, and we represent lived experiences, including being immigrants, undocumented, living in rural communities, or system impacted through foster care, incarceration, or being unhoused. This group was recruited through a statewide call by utilizing a variety of recruitment strategies, such as word of mouth, social media, and recommendations to engage with the full range of perspectives covering Medi-Cal's diverse youth and young adult population.
Thank you so much, Setara. So one of the other things, another advisory group we had, in addition to our youth and young adult advisory group, was making sure that our campaign is grounded in science and best practices. And we had a panel of subject matter experts, including the former California Surgeon General, Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris, and many other professionals with varied experience you'll see here. Our subject matter experts have met and still continue to meet on a regular basis to review and inform the campaign development process through the lens of their experience, including community mental health, equity and health disparities, looking at structurally vulnerable populations, rural communities, system impacted youth, and also Hispanic, Latinx immigrant families. So this is a wonderful panel of experts we've had who've been so committed to working with us and making this campaign come to life. And so now I'm going to also pass it back to Setara to talk a little bit more intimately about a lot of the insights that came from youth in this campaign's development, which really informs how we think about what this topic is about and how we really go about creating this campaign for youth and young adults. I will just preface to say that while there have been several campaigns and initiatives to talk about ACEs, this is really one of the first that is very specifically reaching youth and young adults in California, and I believe kind of more broadly too. So we're really proud of just how much work we put into really making sure we're hearing what young people think and feel and how they think about this topic, and making sure that we're creating a campaign that is relatable to them. So with that, I'll pass it back to Setara to talk to you about what they heard.
So in addition to what you heard earlier from Dr. Ramos, with low awareness and knowledge of what terms like ACEs and toxic stress mean among young people across California, the following are some key barriers we heard from youth when it comes to developing a behavior change strategy and approach to help people begin their healing journey. Many youth shared with us that they do have feelings of stigma and shame about their past experiences, and many of them are at various stages of being able or being willing to seek support for ACEs, toxic stress, and their effects. We also heard that there is kind of like a certain type of pressure on young people that it is up to them to change cycles of trauma. However, this is more of a community issue, and the burden should not be solely on young people. And once young people learn about the effects of ACEs on their lives, they are willing to take actions. There was also a theme of mistrust when seeking out support services. Many young people also shared that seeking out help is not easy, and it can be hard to find help. And another common theme was that healing is not linear, and the journey toward healing is not always clear. It was also important for young people to recognize that healing is defined differently among different individuals and that it takes time. And lastly, many of the young people shared that it is important to acknowledge root causes and systemic issues that perpetuate ACEs, and we should not blame parents and caregivers because sometimes many factors are out of their hands. Next slide, please. To highlight some key perspectives from youth, I'd love to share the following 2 quotes from youth we engaged with on their thoughts about what they wanted to the campaign to be like. I think something very impactful is having someone who has been through the process of healing talk about how hard the struggle can be to bounce back from tough experiences. Give concrete experiences of the struggle they went through and be honest if they still don't feel like they're completely healed. It gives other youth hope that they can get better, but also that it is okay to not be perfectly healed. We had another youth share with us. It is important to show that young people are not alone and that there is a reason for what they're feeling and experiencing, both mentally and physically. Next slide, please. At the heart of behavior change and the Live Beyond campaign are the beliefs and emotions that prepare us to take actions. How our audiences, specifically young people, feel when they see, hear, or otherwise connect with the campaign will be instrumental in opening their minds to absorb new facts or forming norms towards taking action to begin their healing process from the effects of ACEs and toxic stress. Our group of youth advisors let the civilian team know in our own words how we wanted the campaign to make us feel, and they were hopeful, safe, deserving, supported, understood, empowered, and driven to take action. These emotions are critical in advising how the campaign looks and feels, along with the messages that get shared and the outreach and the social strategy. And I'll pass it back to Camelia.
Okay, thank you, Satara, so much. So after our listening sessions, our convenings with youth, and more, we really culminated in the grounding strategic insight here. And I think you heard Satara say it earlier. We heard time and time again from young people and their caregivers this idea that healing isn't linear. I think many of you noticed there's a squiggle line that is incorporated throughout our campaign. It's this idea that it's not always a straight path, it's a journey. And that journey means many different things for different people, depending on their context of where they're at, what resources they have available, and just making sure that we're giving respect and understanding that this is something of a process. However, there is a widespread recognition that healing is important and critical, and that there are small things that we can do today and big things that you can do in the future to heal from the effects of ACEs and toxic stress. Also important to note for young people is that top of mind is their relationships. You heard Dr. Ramos say earlier that we're really thinking about adolescents, youth and young adults, and what a key part of their lives and kind of thinking about brain development. And we know that how they relate and interact with their friends, parents, partners, other adults is so critical at this stage. And so we talk a lot in our campaign about the ways that ACEs and past experiences and adversity can shape our reactions and our responses, and that there are, some healthy and maybe not so healthy ways on dealing with stress, but we are there to share positive, healthy ways to manage stress or triggers or strategies in ways that matter most to young adults. And when we look at this, we talk from a very public health lens to make sure that we talk about the health effects, but we're really trying to relate to what people care about in the here and now, which is oftentimes relationships. And you'll see that show up in the little things we're going to show you down the road. Okay, so next slide. I'm going to share a bit about the testing that went into developing our Live Beyond campaign, as well as several different directions we had before we landed on Live Beyond. So if you see here, the key campaign message that resonated most was this idea of we're living beyond. We're living beyond the hardest things that happen to us. We can overcome the hurt. There's healing ahead. We're stronger than our trauma. We're also being very careful to say that oftentimes people grow from their trauma. I think Dr. Brooke Harris uses the term that, our ACEs can sometimes be our superpowers. Sometimes the hardest things that have happened to us have defined us and made us so much stronger, and they're part of our journey. So we don't want to completely absolve what happened to us in the past, but thinking about it, we can overcome maybe the worst thing that happened to us. Next slide, please. And if you go, we kind of think about how we tested this, and we did a lot of first just listening to get a sense of what this campaign should be about. Is it going to be about facts and science, and kind of really thinking through our strategy of letting people just first know what these terms are and why they matter, and then thinking about how we're going to sort of shape and influence beliefs towards healing. We did test this concept with about 177 youth and young adults, parents and caregivers across the state, including Spanish-speaking participants. And we had a lot of diversity in our groups. At the right here, you'll see kind of self-identified race and ethnicity, but we also had a lot of individuals who identified as Two-Spirit LGBTQIA, many who had current or former child welfare involvement, and also many who self-identify with having some mental health struggles and challenges. And interestingly, even when we tested, apart from the RAND survey, a lot of folks had not heard of the term ACEs, had not even, and it was very new. So there is a lot of work we need to do to just build awareness about what this is and why it matters, in addition to this idea that healing is possible and there's very clear evidence-based things we can do to help manage stress. Next slide, please. And just to give some insights on why we had a few other things we heard from youth and we shared with our Youth Advisory Council, kind of here's some of the concepts. We tested these with audiences across the state, but why this idea of live beyond? It was, again, kind of the winning concept, but also this idea of emotional and motivational impact. There was feelings of hope, optimism, positivity, assurance, promise, encouragement, and empowerment with this idea of living beyond. It's very clear and straightforward too. It really conveys what the campaign is about and what info one would expect when you engage with the campaign with very simple and clear direct messaging. And it's very future focused. We want to be very careful when we're developing campaigns for youth and young adults that we don't want to come off as pandering to a younger generation. We don't want to try to speak in a way that isn't authentic or resonant, but being very clear about what we're talking about, why we're talking about, and why it matters. And just on the left, you'll hear some quotes. It was the sincerest and least corporate sounding. Young people are very key to what is, quote unquote, corporate sounding. It's clear, positive, and relays the essential message. And that a parent and caregiver shared that this just jumps right out at them. It makes mention of trauma and hurt, and these are things that people are actually going through, or emotions that they are feeling. It also mentioned that there's hope. And one thing I will also share when we talked a lot with Sethar's group of youth is just this idea of authenticity. What does that really mean? And so you'll see how that showed up. We can't fake authenticity. We can't there's not really ways to sort of pretend to be authentic. And so much of our strategy has really been involving youth in actually creating a lot of the messages, sharing their stories, because that is how we can build trust and engagement with this topic that's very new for many. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to walk through our campaign visual and creative, which many of you may have seen already, but there's so much more on our website, so we encourage you to take a look at that. We do have billboards and ads across the state that are up right now, so if you might have come across some Live Beyond creative, but we'll walk you through. Next slide, please. So this is a lot of what our creative looks like. On the bottom, we have what are kind of our key feelings we want to convey: optimism, encouragement, and being real. And you can kind of see the squiggle line that we're incorporating throughout this idea that healing isn't linear. There's healing ahead. We can live beyond ACEs and toxic stress. You'll note there on the bottom, one big thing we do is stickers, because young people, that is how they express themselves. They're putting stickers on their water bottles, on their laptops, on so many things. And so what better way to convey this message to friends, others, this idea of living beyond. There's healing ahead. Next slide, please. And this is a very quick preview of our website, but this won't do it justice. I really encourage everyone to visit livebeyondca.org. We are really being careful to mix kind of a balance of facts, things that are, important things to know, the science-based points, very digestible pieces of information, but also, again, those journeys, those healing stories, things that are very kind of bite-sized, and help people engage. One thing that we're really excited about too, which Setar will share later, is some of the youth stories we talk about, some of the youth voices that talk about their own moment when they understood what ACEs are about and how they begin healing. Okay, next slide, please. This is just a clip of our social channels. We lean in pretty heavily to TikTok, because as many of you know, young people are on TikTok, but that's a place where you can really share those stories. Those real authentic stories of healing, of when people put it together that, oh, these things that I experienced as a child are things that have a name. They actually have some consequences. And I now have a vocabulary and a language to talk about these things, which is so key to this campaign and this strategy. Before you can begin to think about healing, it's just understanding the impacts and why these things are important, why they matter. There is a term for what you went through. Next slide, please. This is just some examples of our campaign creative. You'll see probably a lot of our billboards up, some of our posters. And again, very positive. There's healing ahead. You can live beyond. Healing is not linear. There's things you can do today and tomorrow. Next slide, please. Okay. So one thing we're also very excited to have is a partnership with Valkyrie. And for those of you chiming in that are adults or caregivers, Valkyrie is one of the most streamed female gamers. She has a very exclusive partnership with YouTube, and she talks a lot about her journey and how she's used gaming. And we think about also the effect of ACEs after COVID and how many young people were isolated. A lot of them were tuning into gaming. And so she really taps into that audience and speaks to sort of her experience. So we'd love to share with you just a brief clip of her talking about that moment when she learned and had a name for things that she went through as a child, what toxic stress meant to her, and a lot more that you can see on our website. But we'll just show a real quick clip right now.
When I first learned about ACEs through this campaign, actually, I was not only shocked that there was an official term for this, but it was also validating. When I was a kid, I just would compare myself to how I saw other people's family life and stuff, and just felt like I got unlucky. My dad was a severe alcoholic to experience all the time, just like him slamming doors and yelling and like punching walls and stuff. I vividly remember like sometimes my dad would come home super drunk and my mom would just like lock me and my sister and her in my room and they would just watch me play games. I've learned that toxic stress is the way my body responded to ongoing stressful events. When I was a lot younger, I had severe asthma. I had my inhaler and everything. I used to get hives every night. And then, of course, you know, the anxiety attacks as I got a little bit older when I was a teenager. I started.
Hey, thanks so much for sharing that clip, Megan. There's a lot more, but I think that's also
When I
just
first learned about ACEs,
sharing how she sort of understood the term and really kind of had a way to talk about ACEs from her childhood, and then also things like very real for her. It was breaking down in hives when she was stressed, and how also importantly how she has since done things to heal, and what she does today in her day-to-day life to take care of her stress, manage stress, anytime she feels triggered, what she actually is doing to sort of help build that healing process for her. So encourage you all to check that out. That's on our website, and we're really excited to have our partnership with Valkyrie. Next slide, please. And so we'd also love to share with you one of our commercials that is out now, very specifically geared towards youth and young adults. And I think as you watch it, just, I think really look at it with the idea of how we talk about this notion of ACEs and toxic stress and how they relate to relationships for young people. So you'll see that come out in this video. So I will show that to you all now.
After the breakup, I realized some things. My trust issues, lack of boundaries, feeling scared all the time. They're connected to my ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. Like growing up around abuse, neglect, substance use, or other trauma. My ACEs still affect my mental and physical health and my relationships. Hey, what's up, man? But I'm learning how to heal and live beyond what happened. And you can too, at livebeyondca.org.
But what I will just share is what is really key about that is you see how he talks about how ACEs affect his health, mental health, and his relationships. And he really is very clear about talking about how there's things he can do now, he can heal, but we really tie it back to things that young people are experiencing, whether it's trust issues or feeling angry, and how they're dealing with stress in the moment that are likely related to things they went through in childhood. Okay, so that's one clip. We also have a beautiful commercial that features a caregiver, a mom with her daughter, and talking about that. But I will now pass it on to Satara to talk about the youth stories that are in our campaign. So Satara, feel free to take it away.
Thank you. So in addition to being brought along in campaign development, providing input in the name of the campaign, the tagline, hashtags, colors, events like healing activities, the influencers, and the visual feel and look of the campaign. As Camila mentioned, we were also able to co-create content, which also goes back to the authenticity aspect that she talked about. So if you go to the campaign website, livebeyondca.org, there's a stories section, and our youth advisors were able to create content. One of the interesting things was that we had certain prompts, such as how we utilize the stress busters. And basically, stress busters are 7 evidence-based ways to mitigate the effects of toxic stress. Or we had like another prompt of like how we heal or share messages of hope for other youth. And there was a briefing session that we had with Civilian, and they gave us guidelines, and we had a deadline, and we were paid for our time. It was a great opportunity that we officially became content creators. And for example, for me, this was my first time creating content, and we were all so excited that this was a new skill set that we learned, and something that we could also put on our resumes. Next slide, please. So we wanted to share some examples of the content that our youth advisors created. For example, this is Juniper's story. Juniper identifies as a transgender man, and let's hear more about his healing journey.
A lot of the healing from my experiences has been through queerness and the culture that accompanies it. Despite the adversity that I have faced, I am able to recognize myself for who I truly am and feel strong in my identity as a trans man. Part of advocating for myself through this queerness is reclaiming control over myself, which has been previously stripped from my person. In my recovery, I'm able to feel prideful in my identity. Instead of being reduced to what trauma I've suffered, I can feel dignified and powerful. I feel understood and welcome in my community. People like me may have had similar experiences, and we can connect over those. Together, we can advocate for each other, even in the face of adversity.
Next slide, please. So this is Shamar's story on what it is like to be a college student and his healing journey.
Hey y'all, I just want to hop on here and go into a little topic on just college stress. I think with every college student, it's kind of, especially when they're a freshman and they move out, I think with every college student, there's like that time or place in their life and they're like, oh my goodness, like I don't know what to do in this situation. And that's where I'm kind of at. I'm not going to go into depth on like what's going on, but as I'm on my way to my mom's house just to talk to her about everything, I just realized that no matter what your circumstance is, no matter what you're going through, you always have, and I know some people don't have a place that they can go back to and stuff like that, but for me, I think that everybody needs a comfort space, a place where they can go and just remember how hard they worked and how much time and effort they put in to get to where they're at right now.
Wonderful. We have a lot more of those. There's so many stories that are available on our website. I think even Setara is sharing her own story and message for youth. And it was really a beautiful collaborative process. I think, as Setara mentioned, some key things to be thinking about when we work with youth is it's a relationship. It's not a one-time meeting. It's a continued sustained engagement and showing up, asking for feedback when we actually think we're actually going to use it when we think about our campaign development, and not just asking for asking's sake, but also importantly, really empowering them to be content creators and share their stories, their art in the ways that work best for them. So there's a lot of that on our website. We also have a place for if young people want to share their story and have it featured, whether it's on our campaign website, our social channels, and more. You see it show up in different places. But we always want to do that. And I think what's been so beautiful about doing this work with young people is that they do want to share. They do want to share how they heal. They do want to share their stories of overcoming adversity. And maybe that's a generational difference we see, but young people are so ready and willing to talk, advocate, and really speak about these issues that affect them most. So we're very fortunate to have done that with our campaign. So I'll talk very briefly about our campaign launch, and then we'll go into some of the resources we have available. Next slide, please. So we officially launched our campaign on Wednesday, May 1st, with some press in English and Spanish. It's had some press pickup so far across the state, and very online social spaces. So of course, appreciate anyone on this webinar too, sharing more about the campaign with their peers and colleagues. And if you go to our next slide, most recently, as in yesterday, we were very excited to share and debut Live Beyond at a Youth Creating Change event in Los Angeles. That is an annual event now in its 12th year that features youth-created films and art as it relates to mental health, suicide prevention, overcoming adversity. And we had a chance to really debut Live Beyond as a campaign and share some of the resources and share some of the videos about what this campaign is about. And I'd love to share with you now one of the videos that we made that worked very specifically with a lot of those youth advisors, how they're talking about ACEs, toxic stress and healing. So we'll show that video right now.
ACEs are those messed up things that happen to you in childhood that probably shouldn't have happened, and you had no control over them whatsoever. And if not cared for properly, they can turn into long-term health impacts. They can even impact your life expectancy.
I knew that I had experienced trauma as a child and adolescent growing up, but I didn't realize how high my ACE score would be.
It led me to eventually end up being incarcerated at the age of 19, you know, where I was facing 23 years to life in prison. And I just correlate all of that to, like, you know, the traumas that I was enduring growing up.
So having that scale by the Surgeon General of positive stress, tolerable stress, and toxic stress provides us a reference and a framework of what can and cannot be acceptable for people and their health.
Drinking teas, eating healthy, having a morning and night routine, just kind of soothing my nervous system.
Yeah, for me, the biggest coping mechanism that I utilize is movement. And right now in my life, that's boxing.
Some of the things I do to help me manage my stress. So I like to paint and I like to knit sweaters and different outfits.
I'll spend hours just kind of tuning out, just sketching different types of things. It definitely helps, you know, ground me.
I've been very blessed to find people who are on a similar healing journey. So we have similar vocabulary and similar experiences that we can relate about and we can share. I was able to learn through them how powerful I was and how I'm more than just my pain.
The person who had the most impact in my life is Crystal Guerra. She was my therapist inside of Orange County Juvenile Hall. She played a pivotal role in me being able to self-actualize and kind of realize that I wasn't my worst mistakes.
You're more than the worst thing you've done, and you're far more than the worst thing that's happened to you. You know, just because of the environment that we came up in doesn't mean that we're always going to be subject to something that's unhealthy and unpleasant, traumatic. At the point now where I am living beyond, you know, what I went through, and I'm working with people every day, young people, like helping them get their second chance, helping them live beyond some of those similar experiences that we had that might have been so traumatic.
Thank you. We are very proud of that video and just so grateful for so many of the young people that are there that we still meet with and work with. I feel like a few of them are probably on this webinar right now. So Jada, Sharon, Ronnie, Sway, thank you so much for sharing your story and being willing to be so vocal and involved in this campaign from really ideation to where we are now. So thank you. Next slide, please.
ACEs are those messed up things that happen to you in childhood.
All right. So now I will pass it on to my colleague, Cara, to talk a little bit more about the resources we have for youth, for CBOs and more. These are all available on our website right now. I think I popped in the link earlier in one of our chat questions. They are available in Spanish, and Cara will mention there's going to be some other languages that are coming very shortly, but I'll pass it over to Cara to talk through the resources.
Great. Great, thanks, Camelia. So we're super excited to share that we have a bunch of resources available digitally for you to share with your local communities or among your friends and peers. And as Camelia said, these are all available digitally for download on our website, livebeyondca.org. And you can easily navigate from the homepage to this campaign resources page shown here. Next slide, please. So just want to share with you a few of the tools available. We have a variety of stress busting tools and educational resources, such as a healing journal, which has daily journaling prompts and inspirational quotes. We have palm cards that educate about ACEs and toxic stress and how that might manifest mentally or physically. We have a bookmark on the bottom here that drives to a carefully curated book list of fiction and nonfiction books related to trauma and healing and overcoming adversity. That's also available on our website. Next slide. We also have a variety of fun stickers for your water bottles or your laptops. We've got an accordion style piece lower down that you'll see, which is a stress buster pocket-sized card meant to serve as a reminder of stress busting tips that you can fold up and take with you on the go. You'll also find a campaign activation ideas guide on how to best use these materials to activate the campaign. And we so appreciate your support sharing these resources in your communities and helping to get the word out about these accessible and effective healing strategies. These are just some of the tools we have available already. More is to come. As Camelia was saying, these are available in English and Spanish, and in the coming weeks, we're also going to be going to have these materials available in other languages, and we'll be sure to upload those to the site as soon as those are available as well.
So, and I think I saw a question earlier about talking about positive childhood experiences. And so that is something we're going to be building out on and talking very explicitly about what are those things that parents, caregivers, and community can do to really make sure that we are being thoughtful about our how we talk about things you can do to really counter the effects of ACEs and toxic stress. So with that, I have a couple of questions here in the Q&A that we will go ahead and take some time to answer. If we don't get to all of them or we don't have an answer right now, we will follow up in an FAQ document. But one of the questions we have, and again, at this time, feel free to put them in the Q&A, is there any potential to collaborate to bring this campaign to other states or something similar? I don't know who wrote this because they're anonymous, but absolutely. Yes, we'd love to hear what you're thinking and what you're interested in. As I mentioned, I think this campaign is very unique because it is geared towards youth and young adults about this topic. There have been other things that have kind of talked about it more broadly. Right now, First 5 California has a campaign about toxic stress, very specific to parents and caregivers of young children. But we are, this is very unique in the sense that it's really talking to young people. So if you are interested, by all means, send us a note. You can email us info@livebeyondca.org. And we'll put that email up later, but we'd love to hear what you're thinking. And of course, we'd love to help collaborate. Okay. Materials mailed to our organizations. So right now, all of our materials are available digitally. And as Cara mentioned, they're in English and Spanish, and we're going to have several other languages up in the upcoming weeks. If we are working with several CBOs through the Cal HHS has a Children, Youth, and Family Network as part of the Children CYBHI initiative. We're working with them, and as well as our partners at ACES Aware, who really have reach across the state into tribal organizations. They reach youth, but we will likely have opportunities to mail out some to organizations. So I would just say, just send us a note and we can kind of work to see if we can make that happen and get you a toolkit for your organization and agency. I think I've answered some of those. Let me go through any common signs of toxic stress that providers look for. So there is a question, we are, I will say one of the things we are also going to do is we are going to create more collateral as well to get into provider offices. As you saw from Dr. Ramos's slide, we're really thinking about youth and young adults, parents and caregivers, as well as thinking about other places and spaces that young people are in, whether it's healthcare provider offices, pediatrician offices. So kind of talking more about that because we want them to find a way to refer patients and kind of let them know about this initiative, this campaign, to learn more about things you can do to help begin healing. So that will include things to watch out for, things to look for. Also, in a lot of our campaign socials, we talk about how things like toxic stress can manifest, whether it's things like you saw in the commercial, anger outbursts or feeling stressed all the time, feeling worried. And you hear a lot of that from the young people who are talking about the campaign, of how they've sort of come to terms or how they've talked to their provider about experiencing toxic stress, or when they realize they might want to get some further support and help. So that's also something that's very real in our campaign. And I think for young people, hearing it from other young people is extremely resonant and impactful, probably much more than something they'll read, but we have it in multiple forms. Any other questions we have? We have a couple more minutes for questions. I will say this is our initial launch. We have a lot more materials and tools that are going to be coming. If you go to our next slide, I want to make sure to share out our campaign social channels. Please take a look at what we have on Instagram, on Facebook, as well as TikTok. TikTok is where we have a lot of video content, and we really lean into this idea of things that are talking about facts that are very digestible for young people and really relate to things that they are going through in their lives here and now. So definitely please check those out. We have a lot of also youth content that's on there in addition to what Satara showed you on the website. And we did talk about one of the things we're also working through. I think many of you might have been aware, there's a question we have right now about in-person events. One of the things we will be looking to do is thinking about doing smaller events, partnerships or sponsorships kind of really across the state. So that is something that we will be sharing out as soon as those are scheduled. We just had the event yesterday in LA in partnership with Youth Creating Change, and really talking about it and sharing it with, I think, about 500 or so young people from LA County. But we will be thinking about other opportunities and sharing those out. As long as you've been on this webinar, you'll probably be on a listserv that will notify you of Live Beyond events that are happening in your community or somewhere nearby across the state. Any other questions from folks? Looking in our Q&A. Everyone will be getting a copy of the slides, and the webinar recording will be shared out, and as well as being posted on our campaign YouTube channel, which also has our commercials and has many of the things from the videos you saw today. And also feel free to share those out in your organization. We'll likely be thinking about tools like any type of short training on Live Beyond, how to share that out with your organization. We have an email blast on that website if you want to share the campaign with your partners and letting them know these resources are available and exist, and would love to get the word out. Cool. Okay, I'll just give a few more minutes to see if any other questions come through. And if not, we will likely end a little bit early and give everyone back some time. This has truly been a collaborative effort. As Dr. Ramos mentioned, it's been quite some time in the making, and making sure that we're really getting it right, and really truly adhering to values of youth co-creation, centering youth voices, and making sure that this is a campaign that they care about and will resonate for them. Wonderful. Okay. Well, without further ado, we will stop the recording, and want to thank everyone today for joining, for sharing your questions and some thoughts that came through in the discussion. And we will be sure to get you all the webinar recording after this. So thank you all so much. Please, please, please follow our Live Beyond channels. visit livebeyondca.org. We'd love to see you on there. Feel free to comment and give us thoughts on what you're seeing. We're only going to make it better and do more, and appreciate everyone's support. And with that, we'll stop the recording.